Welcome to the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast, the only podcast that dares to be both on topic or on premise, and on location or on premises. And that's right, we are on location or on premises here in Santa Clara for Cloud Field Day this week. So our topic is going to be a controversial one. Web3, you've probably heard of it. Something about blockchain and something about monetization and DeFi and NFTs and stuff like that and the web. Well, it's bunk. Before we get into that though, let's meet who's on the panel today.
Hi, I'm Jim Czuprynski. I'm a technology advocate for zero defect computing. You can find me at jimthewhyguy.com.
Hi, I'm Brian Knudtson. I work for a cloud service provider doing kind of market intelligence type stuff. And you can find me online at bknudtson on Twitter.
Hi, I'm Craig Rodgers. I'm a solutions architect with the Camlin Group, and you can find me online at Craig Rodgers MS.
Which of you would like to take a stab at defining Web3? Because that's the hardest thing to do.
Yep.
Well, I think the first thing to really keep in mind is, defining which Web3 we're talking about, because there is this concept of what we've gone through in this evolution of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, using the 0.0 notations. And then I feel like this blockchain aspect of things is becoming a kind of slightly different Web 3 vision than what we were headed towards before. So I don't know if I necessarily would call it an evolution as so much as maybe more of a revolution from what we've seen up to this point, but I don't know. I see it as something a little bit different than what I thought Web3 was ever going to be. So it's kind of a curveball, I guess.
It has opened us up to a lot of new technologies and interactions. When you bring cryptocurrency into it, financial interactions, you have a lot of sites now that are leveraging the blockchain to provide services, and that's even moving up into the enterprise space. With blockchains there like VeChain, providing real-world functionality for large players. PricewaterhouseCoopers, BMW. There's a lot of big names using these blockchains, mainly around the supply and distribution of parts. But it's also coming across into gaming. You have the likes of Poker there. Unreal Engine. You can play games and win or lose virtual currencies. So it has brought a whole new space, as opposed to using a card of some variety or another for USD or, pound sterling.
And the way I've always understood it, I think I pretty well understand blockchain because the databases I work with offer the idea of having a non-immutable table, right? The idea that you insert the row and that's all you'll ever do, right? And the idea of chain of custody is quite intriguing to me as well, right? Because, the first rule I've always told people is, as a DBA, don't ever delete anything because you might want to put it back sometime. So blockchain overcomes a lot of those, just structural things. But to be honest, it's kind of like somebody invented a cure for cancer and it's being used as an aphrodisiac. It just doesn't even make sense to me. It's become so perturbed beyond its, how would you put it, beneficial aspects, and has just brought out so many negative things.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why it has been misused that way is, the concept of decentralization is key to the blockchain technology. And a lot of people see the web and the original design of the internet was to be decentralized and parts could be lopped off completely without hurting the overall whole. And I don't know if it's an intentional configuration of those things or if they're, just assuming that they're the same thing, but I think that people are looking at it as, we need to go back to this decentralized thing and not be so dependent on, these big data server farms or whatever. I don't really see it that way myself, but this is what I've been reading as I hear what it is, and I don't really see where that's an advantage over what we have today.
I think there's a lot of it reminds me of the early days of the internet where we didn't know what was possible. We didn't know how to commercialize it properly. We didn't know how to, we didn't know what services we wanted and certainly ended up having. You know, it was all unknown. And in terms of decentralization, you know, if an application or a workload has a requirement for CPU compute or RAM, that requirement has to be met somewhere. And more often than not, data centers use very efficient means of energy. You know, they're very pro green energy, you know, carbon offsets. They're generally quite good standing in terms of where they source their power. You know, and that'll not be the case for users at home.
Well, I saw an interesting statistic, I think just this week, that the entire cryptocurrency mining endeavors, right, are using the equivalent of the power output or power usage footprint of Finland.
Wow.
Okay, now, Finland's not a huge country, but I got friends there, and it's a pretty modern country. You know, it's a country. It's a country. Okay, it's a country. Okay,
it's a country.
It's a beautiful country. But I guess my point is that's mind blowing. And what is it going to? I have no problem with people using those resources, but more importantly, why aren't we using those same computing resources for, I don't know, doing protein folding and unfolding?
Yeah.
So I want to trying to refocus us a little bit here, because the question is, what is Web3? And now we're off talking about cryptocurrency. But I think this is actually a sign of what's going on with this thing.
Yes.
Because the truth is, nobody has really gotten a box around what Web3 is. And what Craig said is actually very true. I think that we won't know what it is until it's actually out there. There's a lot of promise, but what will it really be? And we certainly didn't know what the internet would bring us. We certainly didn't know what Web 2.0 would bring us, right? I think if we asked people, so generally speaking, Web 1 is considered to be sort of static publishing and people reading, visiting websites that are sort of static. Web 2.0 is very much interactive and more user-generated. So social media, effectively, Facebook is sort of the poster child for Web 2.0 in that it's a website, it's an e-commerce platform, it's a microblog. You could call it a lot of different things, but essentially it's user-generated content that's very dynamic that everybody's participating in. And from my understanding, so I think it's important to note that Tim Berners-Lee did have a Web 3.0 in mind, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yep.
Web 3 is, again, something related to connecting the blockchain to the web. And I've seen some conversations that have suggested a very technical Web 3. In other words, basically a blockchain as a replacement for DNS and for web servers and things like that.
Right.
Maybe not a replacement for a web server, but sort of an integral part of a browsing experience. Whereas I've seen others talking about some of the things that I heard you guys mention as well, which is this idea of micropayments and somehow integrating finance into the web as a way to have sort of peer-to-peer payment for services or something. And there's a lot to unpack there, right? Certainly one of the things that's important is what Jim was just bringing up in terms of the cost of the blockchain. I've heard it compared to a large number of different countries over the years. Who knows, what it exactly is, but I think it's safe to say that it does use a lot of power, and because it's proof of work equals power, and that's how it goes. But that being said, there are other blockchains that are, for example, Chia is proof of space, and Ethereum is moving to proof of stake, and those may not take as much power to run in the future. So let's set aside the mining and crypto, craziness aspect of it, and really kind of focus on what exactly are we doing here with Web3, and is it Bunk? So what does a blockchain have to do with the web anyway?
Good question.
Excellent question.
Excellent.
We all agree it's an excellent question.
Yeah, and I have yet to see anything that really explained to me how the blockchain really plays into it. So the guy that founded Signal, so obviously a big guy in encryption and privacy and stuff like that, had a great rundown of his exploration of Web3 that I really, really enjoyed. And it's on his blog if you want to go look for it. And the takeaway I had out of that really kind of came down to, we centralized a lot of things in order to get where we are today, because people don't want to run the servers. But moving back into what we are hearing as what Web3 is, again, I don't know that anyone's really built it or done anything with it yet at this point, is kind of putting, the idea is that everybody can have their own little thing. And, his conclusion kind of came to me as nobody wants to run their own server. That's why we centralized everything. And Web3 is kind of the promise of being able to take it back and fully owning your own content, not having to rely on Twitter or Facebook. But yet people don't spin up their own blogs anymore because it's a lot of work and not everybody has the skills to be able to do that. So again, how blockchain plays into that, I don't know that I fully comprehend that, other than now you are more responsible for more of the effort, and that's probably not going to fly in the long run, in my opinion.
I'll just mention that was Moxie Marlinspike, and we'll put the link to that in the show notes.
Great, thank you.
I think we've only seen snippets of capabilities, and it could be as simple but effective as putting up a QR code, scanning it, and it joins you to a Wi-Fi network. And the essence of Tim Berners-Lee's Web3 was making information machine readable. And if anything, that's exactly what that is. You're pointing a phone, and the phone can read that. It doesn't have to go on the internet. It just knows how to process that information and achieve a task. But we don't have large, complex solutions chaining together multiple tasks yet that are providing any real function or meeting any real need or necessity. But I think that's yet. It'll come. But I think we've only scratched the surface.
But it's interesting that you use scanning a QR code to start that, because there's the big thing right now is don't scan QR codes because it's dangerous, because you don't know what's on the other side of that code.
Indeed.
And to me, that alone is enough for us to resist moving into that future that you just laid out, because do we feel like we can really ever put the proper controls and security around those things and make it work? And we've all been around long enough to know that security is the last thing to show up in a new technology, because it ends up slowing things down rather than speeding it up, and we're all about speed on these new things. So I personally fear that aspect of things where so much does happen automated just by scanning a thing that you don't know what's on the other side till you scan it.
There's an element of trust involved. If you go around to a friend's house and he says, scan this, it'll get you on my Wi-Fi, you would trust that. If you're walking down the street and you see a QR code,
Don't
absolutely
do
do not scan.
But at the same time, I know of situations where signs are up at a conference and it looks like a legit sign, and somebody pastes something over top of that, and you go and scan it. You don't know that there's no guarantee of who created that QR code, or man in the middle attacks and things like that could occur on that too.
Right.
I mean, until those are all those controls are properly in place, I don't know that I would trust any of them.
It reminds me, for some reason, I'm a fan of old protest songs from the 1930s and 1940s. And there was this classic song from the 1930s in America called "The Banks Are Made of Marble, and There's a Guard at Every Door." And it basically is a really great song about how capitalism and really the banks, the evil banks, if you will, which is ridiculous, locked the normal farmer, seaman, craftsman out of the ability to participate fully in the economy and get the benefits of that. And from my perspective, blockchain really offers that promise, because it allows, any of the three of us to have a secure transaction. And I don't need Zelly, or I don't need JP Morgan Chase or whatever to intervene, right? Because why do I need the bank in the first place? Trustworthiness. Is my money going to be there when I go take it out of the bank, right? Well, what if you could guarantee that trustworthiness without the physical infrastructure? I get it. And that makes sense.
And to me, that's really the value, or the thing that's exciting about cryptocurrency, Because exactly, why are the banks made of marble? The banks were made of marble so that people walking by would look at it and say, I can trust that, I can put my money there. And that's why there's a guard at the door too. That guard's not really going to protect your money, but the image of that guard and the image of that bank is what does. And you're right that I think a lot of people, we've heard about the unbanked. We've seen a lot of efforts by companies from PayPal to even American Express to try to bank the unbanked. And yet a lot of people still aren't banked. And so that is actually an exciting aspect of this. And similarly, we've seen all throughout Web 2.0 ways to try to monetize internet stuff in a way that benefits and rewards content creators. And so far, that's not happening so much. In fact, I mean, one of the hallmarks of the early internet was, the end of music sales. And the end of movies and downloads and all this. Well, so that is exciting, right? I think that we can all agree that that's an exciting prospect, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
I think you're touching on the thing that I can most get behind in that is, that the freedom aspect of Web 1.0 has gone away with Web 2.0. There's reasons for that, and the balance needs to be cut there. But the other thing I would touch on is, as we talk about the centralization is there for trust in a lot of ways. It does introduce risk on, are they going to be able to protect my money properly? Decentralization means you're on your own. You've got to protect, you've got to patch, you've got to update, you've got to ensure availability and whatnot. So that, again, that puts more of the risk on me as an individual to deal with that. But there's also a cost of entry. And when we start talking about those people in countries that don't have the money, that can't afford to get in, it takes $100 to open up a bank account and have a checking account.
Right.
There are fees, and they're gonna screw you somehow because they need to buy the marble. But in the end, to buy a Bitcoin or Ethereum is way beyond most people. I don't even know how to do it because I haven't invested the time to figure it out. Whereas getting into a bank account is actually really easy. So, the promises, I love the promises of cryptocurrency, and apologies for falling back into this trap, but again, blockchain being the central and cryptocurrency being the obvious example is not, getting into it is not a simple thing. It costs money, and while I love the fact that it's kind of designed and promoted as something that will help third world countries and not having to rely on a central bank, if they can't get into it, they can't get into it. It doesn't matter.
Right. And we've had microfinance opportunities in diverse populations in India, trying to bring Dalit women and other minorities up by doing this. We did that all without cryptocurrency, right? And it works. It still works today. So the good part of it is, right, that, we could potentially uplift even more people, but let's be honest, humans are greedy. And, how many pizza money millionaires have suddenly arose because of Bitcoin or whatever they might have done by using cryptocurrency. And I don't know, it just feels to me an awful lot like the tulip revolution many, many hundreds of years ago in Europe.
There's hundreds of millionaires from Dogecoin alone.
Right.
Off the back of a couple of tweets. Literally hundreds. People who spent $100
and did nothing millions. But hold on to it long enough.
You're right, absolutely. Money comes into it.
Sure.
But we're back. We have went back around to cryptocurrency, but we're back around to the fact that you alluded to there. Something has to process these functions, and if that's a blockchain or a decentralized application has to live on top of a blockchain. So unfortunately, cryptocurrency is one thing, but a blockchain technology is completely separate.
Absolutely.
You can have a blockchain providing functionality that has nothing to do with currency.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think we're going to see things evolve better.
Actually, I read an interesting clip from an article in the New York Times recently about a crypto project, again, crypto, right? That the authors call a normie utility. It's called Helium, and I hadn't heard about this before. And decentralized long-range wireless network, it uses cryptocurrency to reward people for sharing bandwidth on their Wi-Fi compatible devices, right? So, I mean, the interesting thing, like just looking at new appliances for my kitchen, right? And they got those things with those giant cell phone type things in there. Yeah. They said if you implemented that in a reasonably sized suburb of Chicago, you would essentially suck the power grid dry to power those things. But wait a minute, what if we could retask that? Kind of like almost using cars, EVs, or battery electric vehicles to, hey, when you need to store the extra energy, we'll store it there. I mean, we've got the technology. Why not leverage it?
Helium is a very interesting one there that you've touched on. The premise of that is that you essentially buy an access point that has a bit of smarts.
Right.
You put it in the location with the most footfall that you can imagine, a train station or a bus station.
Right.
The more people that connect and use the Wi-Fi, the more you're rewarded with helium. And that's a way that rewards the person providing bandwidth with financial recompense through the helium tokens. But that's considered mining helium by giving away internet and getting as many people on as possible.
Yeah. I mean,
and you literally cannot order these.
They're just
months and months and months. You know, there's a black market for them at incredibly inflated prices.
People are greedy, though.
Yeah. I don't want to rain on the parade, though, but I should point out
we're not talking about Web3 anymore.
I run Tech Field Day, and at Networking and Wireless and Mobility Field Day, we've learned quite a lot about the technology behind this, and there's a couple of reality checks that I'd like to inject here. Number one, it's LoRaWAN, which is incompatible with all consumer devices. That's what you're sharing. So you're basically sharing something useless. Now, it's not 100% useless, because it is used by some industrial automation and vehicle tracking and things like that, but it's not something that is actually used very widely, and it's not something that actually needed infrastructure because it already has the infrastructure it needs. If you're trying to track containers in a container port, well, the container port puts up a couple of LoRaWAN and they're good to go. Like, they don't need to track it through your neighborhood. The other thing about helium is, as you said, is that you're earning based on sharing, but that's not actually where the blockchain is. The blockchain is actually the conventional blockchain. But let's get back to it. I want to get back to one of the things that Craig brought up, which was interesting, is that in addition to cryptocurrency, which we all know about, and NFTs, which we're hearing about, of course, there's also an aspect of blockchain that is, Ethereum is famous for, which is essentially programmability, the idea that you've built a distributed computer. And you can actually run code in the Ethereum network, and that's how NFTs work. You can run code on top of most blockchains. Chia has a Lisp version that will run in the blockchain as if it was a distributed computer, which is exciting. But there again, the question is, and I want to wrap this discussion up here, we've heard some pretty exciting and interesting things. And again, I'm not trying to cut out helium as being exciting and interesting. It is exciting and interesting. But the question is, why are we doing this so think about it. We can already share bandwidth and earn money. It's called being an ISP. Yeah. We can already have decentralized finance. In fact, more people use their telephone number as a form of inexpensive DeFi around the world. I know that's not something we do in the first world for the most part, but much of the rest of the world uses phones as a bank, and they send money between phones. We can already do that. We can already do microfinance. We can already do a lot of things, and we don't need the blockchain to do them. So my question is, Web3 is somehow it needs the blockchain. Can you think of some reason that it needs the blockchain as opposed to just, I don't know, renting a mainframe or having something running in AWS or using a phone or, just doing something the regular way?
I guess I see it as potentially. I mean, if you can, with the thought of running things on top of the blockchain, theoretically, you throw some code out there, and whoever happens to run it runs it. The reliability of that, like if I'm building a reliable application, I mean, downtime in AWS is already a concern people have to architect around. Whether they do or not is another story. But, how do you architect around it when, are there guarantees as to where it's going to run, when it's going to run, what the latency is going to be, who's going to pick it up and actually process it? From an enterprise app perspective, I would find that that's going to be a challenging, that's going to be a hard challenge to overcome, I guess.
There's a couple of layers in play there. One is the website, the front end, that still needs to be hosted somewhere. Yeah. The back end processing is being provided by, say, the smart contracts that Stephen was alluding to. And then you have commercial blockchains, AWS have blockchain.
Of course, they're AWS.
VeChain, you have corporate entities running the blockchain service.
Sure.
So what is the difference between running servers and applications in a data center and a blockchain in multiple locations to provide that decentralized access aspect? It's the same thing in that extent. Bunk?
The thing I think that's interesting about this, it was just flashing in my head, and I don't mean to sound off color or anything, but it sounds to me like I've got a friend that really is into robotics and, creating human-like structures, right? And it's almost kind of like a joke of, well, as soon as we get that first human-capable robot that we can really see, one of the first questions is going to be, and I don't mean to make this blue, but can I have sex with it? And it just seems to me like, okay, and you're shaking your head, but I mean, it was on the Big Bang Theory, okay? I'm just
fix that in post.
But if you think about it, well, we can clean it up in post. But it's almost like that, where that's what you want. I've given you this marvelous tool, and it could carry your mother from the bed to the shower and help her take a bath, and you're thinking about something. We'll fix it in post. Something that you're thinking about, something completely different that you shouldn't be thinking about.
And I guess that's, that would be my summary of all of this, is that we've got this wonderful tool. And I have to say, I'm actually very bullish overall on the concept of blockchain. I love the fact that you can have a distributed immutable database. I love the fact that you can have cryptocurrencies that exist outside the global financial system to some extent. I love the fact that you can, run code. I love the idea of smart contracts. It's such a great idea. Yeah. But the problem is, we're back to what you pointed out with your Big Bang Theory reference, because truly it's so disappointing that all of this technology is used to sell a rip-off image of somebody else's photo, or to sell a song that doesn't belong to you, or to try to monetize something so that you can pull the rug out from under your investors and walk off with the money, or to try to
straight up launder money.
Yeah, straight up launder money.
Exactly.
That's so sad. And to me, I'm going to kind of wrap this up by saying I think Web3 is bunk, not because there's anything wrong with the technology, but because there's something wrong with the people. Because again and again and again, what happened here is, instead of being a new world reserve currency, it becomes a massive, hedge fund that's people are trying to invest in, and then there's just all this front running going on that's actually keeping people from ever actually making any money, because it's possible to do that in the Ethereum chain. Look it up, and it's just disappointing. It's just colossally disappointing.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right, so one word answer only.
Oh, wow.
Web3 is bunk or not bunk? Craig?
Bunk for now.
For now. Oh, that was 3 words. Okay.
Bunk.
Bunkity bunk.
Splunge.
All right. I don't know. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast here on premises in beautiful Santa Clara, California. Where can we connect with you, and is there something you're particularly proud of?
You can connect with me on my website, craigrogers.co.uk, via Twitter on at CraigRogersMS, and I'm proud of everything I've done in IT.
Okay. So I'm Brian Knudtson. You can find me on Twitter at bknudtson. My website's knut.net. I do have my own podcast called The Cloud Bites that I do for work. And I can be found on LinkedIn as well, where, I'm of course going to promote any of the cool stuff that I've done there. So.
And I'm Jim Czuprynski. You can find me on Twitter at Jim the Y Guy. And I'm also the co-host of the Beyond Tech Skills podcast. If you get a chance, drop in, have a listen.
And as for me, I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. You can find me on Twitter at @sfoskett and on most social media networks as Stephen Foskett, because there really aren't a lot of Stephen Fosketts out there in the world. So that's a good way to find me. So thank you very much for joining us for the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion, you can find it in most podcast applications, so please do give us a rating or review and share it with your friends. This podcast is brought to you by GestaltIT.com, your home for IT coverage from across the enterprise. For show notes and more episodes, go to GestaltIT.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.